You are listening to The Art of Sales. Everyone sells every day, and this is your source for conversational, real-world sales and prospecting methods that you are comfortable using and that get results. You'll help people buy instead of pushing them into being sold. Here's your host, Art Subcheck.
Well, hi again and welcome, and thank you for joining me. I've heard from so many of you, both longtime friends who've been with me, in some cases over 20 years, and others who are barely that old and just found us on iTunes. As I mentioned in the intro episode, my goal is to share with you common sense sales methods that are conversational and don't sound salesy, and are easy to use regardless of whether you're a seasoned, high-level sales executive or you need to get donations for your local fundraiser. All equally important. And if you have suggestions for anything that you'd like me to cover, just shoot me an email at arts, A-R-T-S, at businessbyphone.com. Okay, in these first few shows, I'm covering many of the fundamentals of sales and the sales process. It's kind of like a sales 101 based on my philosophy. And by the way, I don't claim to have invented sales like some people out there. Over the years, what I've done is taken the best things that I've seen and amassed in my huge library here, and also, of course, learned through experience and learned through working with several hundred clients over the years, and just kind of molded my own process and philosophy. And that's what I'm sharing with you again in the early episodes. And after we get all these laid down, then we're going to be going deeper into more specific topics. And I'll be bringing on other guest experts, like I mentioned, and also other successful sales pros from the field. And then people who maybe don't have sales in their title, but nevertheless still sell in what they do. And we can learn some of their secrets as well. Okay, today we're going to talk about screeners and gatekeepers. And by the way, that's going to be one of the only times you're going to hear me use those terms to describe them. Here's a question that I get all the time. What tricks can you give me to get around or through the gatekeeper? Again, there's that word. Well, here's my answer. Don't even try it. So I'm going to go through what you need to do instead to get to decision makers and work with these people. I just shake my head when I hear experts suggest that you need to go through or around or over or past gatekeepers. It's a sign that these people just don't get it. Anyone who has to rely on tricks or deception to get through likely experiences something like this scenario. So let's say the assistant puts the caller on hold who was just being evasive and then says to the boss, "Hey boss, I got some bozo on the line here. He's trying to being a little bit shady and trying to bully me into getting through. He's not going to give me any information. Should I get rid of him?" And of course, the boss says, "Oh yeah." And the assistant just smiles wickedly as that person gets rid of that salesperson. So let me be clear here. Again, I despise the terms gatekeeper and screeners. They're so negative, and they cast a negative light on the person who holds the golden key to your decision maker's door. That's why I prefer to call them assistants. They're the buyer's assistants, and they're ours too. The person who picks up the phone and responds to your call before you get to the decision maker, that person, the assistant, is the most important person in your life for the next several seconds or minutes. So you need to treat them that way. So here's my main rule when dealing with assistants. Treat them like you would the buyer. That's right. Treat them like you would the buyer. Too many sales reps feel that they don't have to sell until they reach the decision maker. Wrong. You've got to be prepared to explain your possible value to whomever answers the phone and is between you and your prospect or customer. Really, let's examine the role of the assistant. What is it? It's to protect the decision maker's time. It's not to get rid of all salespeople, although it seems like that sometimes, right? I mean, you can reach the buyer a greater percentage of the time by being prepared to help the assistant do his or her job. And we'll do this by communicating that we're not there to just try to sell and waste the boss's time. And we've got to do that pretty concisely and clearly. We've got to communicate that we've got something that is worth taking a look at. So whenever an assistant asks, what's this in reference to? We have to have a persuasive reason ready to roll. And if we don't, we're going to fail the first test. And then we're positioning ourselves in the assistant's mind as somebody who's just selling something. Really, what they're asking themselves is this: does this person have anything of interest or of value for the boss? Matter of fact, I've said this to assistants before. Pat, actually, you and I both have the same goal, and that's to make sure that Mark's time isn't wasted and that he only speaks with people who have something of value. So that's why I'd like to ask him a few questions to see if what we have might be something worth taking a look at. If the assistant perceives that someone is being evasive, that just causes them to ask more questions. Questions that are usually designed to disqualify the salesperson. And then the assistant says things like, maybe you've heard these, just send any information you have. She's in a meeting right now. Well, we're all set with what we're using. So really then, our goal is to help the assistant understand that we have something of potential value that might be able to help the buyer in several ways. So let me give you a few brief points here to keep in mind that will help assistants do their job, and therefore help you get through a greater percentage of the time. First, just like within every other call, we need to do our online research. The basis of my smart calling prospecting system is first collecting intelligence about the decision maker, their company, anything that's going on in their world. So of course, we certainly should be going to Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, finding anything that might be relevant. Look for anything we can use that is going to set us apart and contribute to the possible value that we're going to use in our messaging that helps us ultimately to get in and make a connection. Now, we're going to go into a lot more about this in future shows. For now, I would suggest just go back to the episode on cold calling, taking the cold out of cold calling. Next, we want to prepare our assistant strategy as part of our pre-call planning. Know what you're going to say if the assistant asks you questions. This is just as important as our opening statement and the questions that we're ultimately going to be asking the decision maker. Also, we want to do social engineering with the assistant, and this is simply engaging them and asking questions. You can get lots of information by simply asking questions of assistants and others in the process of asking questions. You position yourself as somebody who really cares about being prepared before you speak with the decision maker, as opposed to the salesperson who's just smiling and dialing and trying to bulldoze their way in. So I suggest saying to the assistant something like this: well, you probably work closely with Pat, don't you? Well, great. Well, I want to make sure that I'm prepared when I speak with her, and there's probably some information you could help me with. And then what you do is you ask questions. We'll do an entire episode on social engineering because that is just so powerful with assistants and anybody, actually. Also, we want to have a justification statement ready to roll. A justification statement is simply the response to the question, what's this in reference to, or what's this about? I mean, think about it. Who are assistants told to get rid of? Time-wasting salespeople. That's right. And the only way you can avoid being called that is if the assistant feels like you have something worthwhile. Here's a piece of crap that I've heard spread by some so-called experts, and that is, You shouldn't give any information to the screener. I read a recent post online saying you're not supposed to give the screener any information. If they ask a question, answer it with just one word or two. And then you should say, and please connect me. I mean, come on, what nonsense that is. If they want to know why you're calling, you need to be ready to very, very clearly explain it. Now, the key, though, is that you don't want to talk about your thing, like we talked about in one of our first episodes. We want to talk about our results, because assistants get rid of people who sell things, but people who have some possible results, well, now you have their attention. An example of this would be, in speaking with one of your sales reps, I heard that your company invests quite a bit in trade shows, but ideally you'd like to generate more leads from them. So what my company does is we specialize in helping exhibitors generate more pre-qualified booth traffic. And I just like to ask Mary a few questions, see if it'd be worth our while to speak. Now, you see, I'm not talking about the thing there because you don't even know what I sell, but I'm talking about the result. So what we're doing here is we're making that interesting, but non-objectionable. That means we don't want to present something that they're qualified to say no to. For example, you wouldn't say, well, I want to introduce our new products, because they'd probably say, oh, we're happy with what we're using now. So again, the assistant needs to hear about a result, not a product or service. All right, I could talk for hours about strategies and messaging to use when working with assistants and getting to decision makers, and we're going to address this a lot more as we move forward. For now, I've introduced my philosophy. No more calling them the G word or the S word, gatekeepers or screeners. We want to work with them and have them work with us to provide valuable sales intelligence and help us get to the buyers. And the only way they'll do that is if they perceive that we have something of possible value and they like us. Hey, they're humans too, right? Okay, do you know what time it is?
Your attitude will be never will, never fear what they say. It's the art of the sales quote of the day.
That's right. It's time for the quote of the day. And today's quote of the day is from Brian Tracy, and it really ties in also to what I just spoke about. And the quote is, satisfy the deep subconscious needs of your customers, which are to feel important, to feel valued, respected, and worthwhile. And in this case, the assistants are our customers as well. And we do want to make them feel important, valued, respected, and worthwhile. All right. Speaking of worthwhile, if these tips are worthwhile, this show is worthwhile for you, please do subscribe. Also, share it with your social network, LinkedIn, Facebook, email it to a colleague, and then also make sure that you're on the list to get notified of future episodes. And if you haven't already, go to smartcalling.com to pick up your free ebook of 501 sales tips. All right. Thank you so much for joining me. And until next time, go ahead and make it your best sales day ever. I'm Art Subcheck.